And so in this past month, the theme has been centered around loving kindness. I love the way the world works. It brings us everything that is the polar opposite of that. And if you've been a part of this community, you've seen how brilliantly our hearts have searched in anguish and in joy to find the tangibility and the definition of loving kindness through means of us personally and also as a community. And you've done a brilliant job. And our work continues. I came across a story. It says a rabbi gathered together his students and he asked them, "How do you know the exact moment when night ends and day begins?" "It's when standing some way away you can tell a sheep from a dog," said one of the students. The rabbi was not content with that answer. Another student said, "No, it's when standing some way away you can tell an olive tree from a fig tree." "No, that's not a good definition either." "Well, what's the right answer?" asked the students. And the rabbi said, "When a stranger approaches and we think he is our brother, that is the moment when night ends and day begins." Metaphorically, we understand night to equal our unconsciousness, our devotion to fear, our domestication, all of the things that pronounce some semblance of separation within us or some survival mechanism that we think we need in order to entertain and to be in this thing called life. In that darkness, we think that we are born to survive rather than to thrive. And the day teaches us that we have the availability when we become curious to open up an inner inquiry inside of us that begins to bring to the altar of our eagerness and our willingness to have these moments of clarity and these moments of aha, shaktipa experiences that teach us that what we have believed up until that point in time was not valid or true. That being a product of a particular environment does not necessarily mean that the things that we were indoctrinated with are of our best interest. And that the more we become pliable and curious with regards to the way in which world works, the more that we become curious as to our understanding and a definition of God that changes as we change, then we begin to experience this day. And it's not a one-time crossover. It's not like you and I cross over a lake or a bridge or a fence and we've entered into day and there we stay. It's that every single human day, 24-hour capsule, we are vacillating between the unconscious and the conscious. We have our dark moments and we have our light moments. And of course, our mission is to entertain that day component as much as possible, to be able to look out onto the horizon and to really sincerely claim that each and every person is our brother or our sister. Wonderful, easy to do in an environment like this. And then there's Facebook. If you were a part of the Summer Book Club series and you are reading Panache Desai's Discovering Your Soul Signature, he said a sentence, or wrote a sentence rather, that I found very profound and very meaningful. And in this chapter on tracking our thoughts, he ends with this. He says, "We dismantle these thoughts first by witnessing them." The thoughts he's referring to are the thoughts of night or the thoughts of darkness. We dismantle these thoughts by first bearing witness to them. If you and I don't bear witness to or become curious as to why we do what we do, why we react the way that we react, why we have these impulses and these particular injustice buttons that are very heated, if we don't become curious about that and we enter into this particular spiritual path or philosophy and we do the affirmations without really having investigated the root of our discontent, then it is like putting a Band-Aid over a gaping wound. And what we come to realize is that then the affirmation or the surface conditioning or the surface practice that has no depth to it eventually bores us because we go, this doesn't work, and off we leave to go to find the next immediate gratification. But it's when we become deeply invested, not interested, but invested in the excavation of those thoughts of separation and what to do about those things, is when we really begin to gravitate and move out of the darkness into the day. Then and only then do we begin to see the course of the path by which it's calling us, when pain pushes till vision pulls, and we start to grab hold of the vision rather than lingering in the pain. And it requires us to be curious. It requires us to bear witness, as Panache Desai said, to bear witness to our thoughts, to become curious as to what it is underneath all of that that has been a part of our darkness up until this point in time. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, wrote in The Science of Mind, he said, the thing to do is not to try to unify with people, but with the principle of life that is behind all people and all things. You see, there's a difference. It's easy to unify with people when we like people. And then when we don't like them, we don't want to unify with them. And we feel very justified in not unifying with them. But Ernest said we must go beyond personality, and we must unify with that which is life, which exists beyond all people and all things. So there's a big difference. And we are called to task in order to remind ourselves that that is our mission here. I read a very profound blog this week, and this man who wrote this just really was spot on. And he started out by saying, we must learn to bear witness to other people. He said, let's face it, it's loud out there. It seems like everyone has something to say and somewhere to say it. And what this man did was he went to one of the political conventions and he erected a booth outside of the arena, and it had across it a sign that said, I'm here to listen, tell me your story. I'm here to listen, tell me your story. Which is a beautiful, direct approach to bearing witness to other individuals. And he was mocked and he was ridiculed and he was laughed at, and he just stayed the course and waited. And from that, beautiful things emerged for him. He said, our Facebook feeds are littered with articles, posts, and images from all types of people. For some of us, this is difficult to handle, so we edit out the ones that we disagree with until our feed looks more like an echo board of our own thoughts. If we're not careful, we will treat people this way, editing out the ones we disagree with until we're surrounded by people who are just like us. Then we wonder why we are so divided. As he sat in his booth that said, I'm here to listen, tell me your story, a sincere woman came up to him and she said, my story is that I believe that every woman who has an abortion should go to prison. And he listened without judgment. And he said, will you tell me why? I would like to hear the story behind that. And just from his willingness to listen to her, he discovers that at 18 she was diagnosed as being barren. That in that diagnosis, she felt shame, and she was shamed by others around her and told that she would never qualify to be someone's love mate because she was incomplete. And she carried that belief into attempted relationships, which never worked out. And as she was now well into middle age, there was an anger there that had never been fully processed. And as she looked at those who were able to just simply have kids, or someone who could get pregnant and then abort that child, she looked at them with loathing and disgust because she could not do that. So he bore witness to her story. When you bear witness to someone's story, it's not about agreeing with them. It's not about liking someone or taking them to lunch. It's about sitting and being with the story and broadening the landscape so that as we look out, we can distinguish when night turns into day. He goes on to write, if we're not careful, he said, we'll treat people this way, editing out the ones we disagree with until we're surrounded by people who are just like us. I know what you're thinking, though. It's my feed. I'll block who I want. I shouldn't have to be offended. I don't have time for that. Life is too short. I only want to see what I want to see. If we're not careful, we will treat people this way, then wonder why we are so divided. He says, if there's one question I get asked more than any other question, it's this: how do I listen to someone then who I disagree with? There are many ways to answer this. It takes a lot of forgiveness. It takes a lot of compassion and patience and courage to listen in the face of disagreement. He said, we must work to hear the person and not just the opinion. And further down he wrote, hear the biography and not the ideology. I believe there is a cop-out that we use in present day when we are in disagreement with other people, and I'm sure you've said it because I've said it. Well, I'm just going to agree to disagree. And you know what's wrong with that statement, really? It's like, I'm right and you're wrong, but I'm going to allow you to be wrong as I stay in my rightness. I will agree to disagree with you, right? It's got some arrogance going on, let's face it, right? What is being called for us at a deeper level, and this is what is so beautiful about a spiritual path, you see, is we go around and we bandy about the idea of oneness. But you see, oneness isn't simply about those people that we like. Oneness is understanding that humanity in and of itself is one entity, which is a derivative of that which is the divine. Polarity then teaches us is that everything is operating in degrees. Some people's degree of operation is in that which is the night. And some degrees of operation in other people are more those who are operating in that which is the light. And so none of us are exempt from either ends of those polarities. And we must begin to look at then how to bear witness to those who don't agree with us without condemning them. When I was a small child, I think I was about 8, must have been, it was after my dad died. So we were members of the First Assemblies of God in Beaumont, Texas. If you don't know what Assemblies of God is, that's hardcore Pentecostal. Praise God, hallelujah. So we were in church a lot. We were in church on Sunday. We were in church on Sunday night. We were in church on Wednesday. There was at least 2 revivals a year that went on, a week long. So church. In fact, my companions growing up were not people in my school. They were actually kids in my youth group. Those were the ones that I grew up with. My mother was in the choir, and she fancied herself the top soprano. When we would arrive on Sunday morning, and Sunday night too, she would immediately go to the choir room where all the choir robes were hung, and she would get her robe on, and they would rehearse before they would sing whatever number they were going to do for that service. And my mother, being this, very much of a diva soprano, she would always get the solos, and she would hold the note longer than necessary. Do you ever see that Bugs Bunny cartoon with the hand, the orchestra hand, and he just kept singing? That was my mother. She could hold a note for like 2 minutes, and of course people would go, "Oh, Jesus, Jesus," and which just egged her on even more. And she would just hold the note, right? She would just hold the note. And so there was about a 6-month window where a new woman joined her choir. And the woman was placed right next to her in the soprano section. And the woman did not look like all of the other women in Beaumont, Texas in the late 60s or whatever. She didn't look like everybody else. I remember she had bright lipstick and just big chunky jewelry, and she would look cool today. She just wasn't one of those people. And when we would come home and we would have Sunday lunch, my mother, for 6 months, would go on and on about how horrible this woman was. She didn't dress right, she was weird, she smelled funny, she couldn't sing, she was either flat or sharp, and at least for 10 or 20 minutes between every Sunday meal, it was my mother's discourse about how despicable this woman was. And in spite of her telling the choir director to move this woman away, he wouldn't move her away from my mother. She had 2 children. They were a little bit older than I was, but they too were kind of eccentric, and you could tell that they had not been born in Southeast Texas, and they were just sort of drifting through, and they never really landed and communed with the other children in the youth group. And so I was curious because I would hear this discourse every Sunday. So every Sunday I would watch this woman, because the choir is up in the loft and we're out here, and I would just watch this woman. And she had her face in that music, and she was just trying to go to town and sing it so earnestly. And you could see my mother going, like this. And then the woman committed suicide in one of the most horrific ways that you can imagine. I'll spare you the details. And we heard it announced that this is what had happened. And so that Sunday lunch, I thought, would be really interesting. I thought I will hear my mother say something different. I will hear my mother perhaps express some kind of remorse about what had been going on. And there was nothing. She didn't talk about her at all. In fact, she just changed the course of the conversation to something else that annoyed her. And I remember at 8 years old sort of sitting there going, there's something really, really wrong with this picture. When we don't bear witness to those who are not like us, we have a missed opportunity to begin to understand what might be going on in their particular world. And here's the amazing thing about that is that it wasn't until later in my life when I had an uncle that I didn't know very well pull me aside and let me bear witness to his stories about what my mother went through that made my mother be the way that she was. And so you see, when we bear witness, we sit and we invite ourselves to see another person's worth. When we do not sit and see another person's worth, can you then imagine the way in which generation after generation after generation denies other individuals their worth that are different than they are? If I carbon copied what my mother did, then generationally I would just be doing the same thing. And we all do that to some degree, and yet we are interrupting that process when we gather together, when we listen, when we study, when we are willing to begin to bear witness to someone else's experience. When we get their story, their biography, the blogger said that we open up to the real possibility of understanding that which transcends disagreement. Like the roots of a tree, our stories which can create our beliefs are completely unique and also connected. It is through story that we find common ground enough to coexist in the face of great, often necessary tension. So the idea of oneness means oneness. You can't have two unities. There's only one unity. And that means then that every sentient being that walks the earth, regardless of what you think about them, is a part of that unified whole. So the idea of being open and receptive to being the channel of oneness, of loving kindness, is beginning to look at the way in which we invite particular people into our realm and then push other people away. Again, there is a distinction between letting somebody just come and verbally vomit all over you and just allowing somebody to have their opinion without completely discarding them. You see, there's two different arenas to that. So the author, his name is Paul Selig. He wrote a book called The Book of Knowing and Worth. He had a terrific analogy in here. He said, we are like people who walk around with picture frames. So if you can imagine you and I walking around with a picture frame. Inside this frame, then, are the people that we have given permission to be in our lives. And so those who are within the boundaries of that framework, of our loved ones or our intimate relationships or the people that we like present day. And then as soon as we don't, they are moved out of the frame. There's created a space where then someone else comes in. The problem with the idea of walking around with a massive frame is that that frame has boundaries. That frame has a finite structure with it, when what you and I are actually called to do is to carry with us a frame that knows no bounds. Because inside that frame, then, is an invitation for the world to be. Our theme for the year, a world that works for everyone, not a world that works for people who do what I want them to do. And I know that it's challenging. He says in this book, understand, when you love another, when you invite them into your frame, you hold them in their worth. That is what you do. And you hold them in their worth unconditionally. There is nothing possible for any man to do, for any woman to do, to make them unlovable by God. But they do not know this. They shut themselves away, and you heal that by seeing them in their worth. You heal that within you by seeing them in their worth. If you can condemn them, if you roll the stone in front of your own cave to block out the light, you're not harming them, you're harming yourself. What that simply means is that when I push away, when I kick out someone from the realm of my frame, I'm then saying that that particular component has no worth. When I make that mental proclamation about another life, I'm also then making that mental proclamation about a facet of myself. When I am condemning some other person's life because of their behavior, which I am not in agreement with, I am condemning a part of my own behavior that I am saying has no value. So this idea then that everything that we need to learn is being pushed right in front of us is wanting to come into our frame of existence in order for you and I to begin to learn what it means to be open and receptive. You see, we are liars in our world. We are spiritual liars all across our globe when we preach doctrine of open and oneness, and yet we are condemning some facet of humanity. The difference is, again, it's not about condoning, it's understanding and being willing to bear witness, to at least try to be curious as to understand why they think what they think. Do you see the distinction between that? And I think if you and I here in this community are really serious about revealing a world that works for everyone, wouldn't it be beautiful right here in Atlanta, Georgia, if we were the ones who took up the mantle of open and receptivity and allowed ourselves to just let people share and to bear witness to that sharing and validate their worth just by listening. And that's all that we ask. What that requires of us is to break free from some of our routine, to break free from our day-to-day rituals, to put ourselves into opportunities and situations that require us to look at what it means to be open and receptive, to sometimes do the things that we think we cannot do in order to regain a sense of self-worth enough that we're able to see the worth in other people. I love Chris. I've asked him actually to come and lead us in grateful giving, but he did something near and dear to my heart. He bore witness walking all the way across Spain, doing the Camino de Santiago. Yes. What did you listen and hear?
So much. You really put me on the spot, like trying to distill it down into a few words. People have said, "Oh, how was your trip?" And it's like there's nothing. It's like saying, "How was college?" It's like there was so much crammed into that experience that it really wasn't a trip. It wasn't like going to New Orleans for a weekend. It was amazing. I've gone to 4 different New Thought churches. This is the 4th one I've gone to, and the one thing I love about New Thought is that it helps me kind of rewrite that tape in my head that tells me I can't do things. And sometimes there are things that are so simple I can't believe I've told myself I couldn't do them. But one thing was about, I guess, 15, 16 years ago, I read the book by Shirley MacLaine about the Camino. And she goes into lots of, past life regressions, all kinds of amazing things. And I said, well, that's something. She's fancy. She's a Hollywood person. She's rich. She can take, all this time off from her life to do whatever she wants to do. But I never thought it was something I could really do until the first time you spoke and you talked about your experience. Like, oh, a real person can actually do that. You laugh, but it's really, that's what it clicked in my head, that you didn't have to be a millionaire to do that a real person that I could see and talk to could actually do that. So a lot of people, when I was on the Camino this summer, said, well, how did you know about this? Did you see the movie? Because some people did it just because they saw the movie starring Martin Sheen called The Way. Some people had learned about it because their Catholic experience, and I'm not Catholic, so they're like, well, how did you do that? Well, my minister told me about his experience, and it let me know I could do that. And it was such a, everything I've learned in New Thought, I felt was coming to fruition in what I was experiencing moment by moment. So one of the biggest things I learned was that everything that is yours, if that makes sense. That I overpacked. Day one, as David warned me, is your most rigorous day because you go from the bottom of the Pyrenees to the top of the Pyrenees and down the other side all within one day. And this is at the beginning of your journey, so your muscles haven't quite gotten used to all that walking and climbing. And I was in the little town St. John where you start the walk, and they give you your passport where you get stamped every day, and they weigh your pack, and the guy says, "Oh no, you cannot do this. No, no." I think it was 16.5 kilo, which is 30-something pounds. Oh. And you're supposed to ideally do about 10% of your body weight. And I don't weigh over 300 pounds. So it was a lot of weight. And I'm going uphill, this whole long time. And I realized this was everything that's in that bag was your choice. Nobody made you put it in that bag. And some people even told you not to put certain things in your bag. But everything you did was things that you chose. So when you decide, you can take things out of that bag. But it's all your choice. Your stuff is your stuff, and you can let go of that stuff when it's time. And I did, bit by bit, looking through, okay, I don't need this. Why did I bring baby wipes? Okay, I don't. There's all these things that seem really important at the time. They really did. I thought a lot about it. But when that pack is digging into your shoulders, like, what on earth was I thinking? Why peanuts? Why did I think I needed a pound of peanuts? Just all these little things. But, one of the biggest things, and this summer was really horrible, I know, and I really appreciate this community so much for how, because I could follow things through Facebook, and I posted lots of pictures on Facebook, but just seeing your response to all the awful things that happened this summer, it made me just so proud to be a part of this community. Just so proud that these were my people. Because I would talk to the other people walking, the other pilgrims, and they didn't have a community that was doing things like this. They didn't have people responding to Black Lives Matters, to Orlando, to just all the things happening this summer. Just every time something happens, you were just a breathing heart, just responding and being in the moment with it. And there's something I felt, I'm talking too much, I know, that to me, it reminded me that there are these dark moments in life and in the world, and the thing that made me not really take that into myself was just breathing in the beauty of life and listening really to the song of life. Because that's one thing, in the silence of your thoughts, and as you're walking these beautiful fields of Spain, you hear the song of life, and you see nature just moving and breathing. And if you listen closely, you just hear life is singing to you. And so much of what we build as people in our busy, busy world, we build all this chaos and noise on top of it. And some of us can find it in a song, and we can find it in a symphony, and we can find it in poetry, and we can find it in a museum looking at a painting. But for me, I find I really hear that song the loudest when I'm in nature like that. Just the purity of nature. And I posted lots of pictures of flowers and of fields, and even sometimes a little video of a field, and just that silence of the wind blowing across wheat. And for me, that's enough to balance out all that negativity that life can throw at you at the same time. So it's made me remind myself how much I need that, and I just encourage you, whatever that is that you need, if it's a Camino, if it's a walk to the Chattahoochee, whatever that is, that you find that thing, if it's a museum and staring at your favorite painting, but find that thing that balances out all that negativity. But that's something I feel like I've found again through this teaching. So I just encourage you to don't just come to these Sunday services and listen to the beautiful words and the beautiful music, but really take these things in on a day-by-day basis. And I think you'll just, how your heart will open up will surprise you. So if we can
stay here. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.